All right, so here we are back on the Zooms. Let's have a quick look at what we're going to be covering today. We are going to have a quick look at the updates from actions from the previous meeting. That's not going to take very long. And then Michael is going to give us a good update on what happened at that Connectathon. Following that, we've got new task waves to get stuck into, which Heath and Michael are going to be covering. So it's all you, Michael, today, I think. All over it. All right, so let's look at really quickly the minutes from the last meeting. They're fairly extensive and we're not going to vote on them today. So these are the eRequesting TDG minutes from the 20th of the 8th. There's quite a lot of detail in there, multiple documents, videos and other things, and they have not been distributed yet. So I encourage you, if you'd like to have a look at what happened there, and based on what Michael's going to talk about, to jump in to the Jira, sorry, the Confluence, and have a look at that page. But also we will distribute them once they are ready, and we'll probably vote on them at the next meeting. Now, I think out of that meeting we had 3 action items that I know are listed here. Michael, do you know more about these?
Yeah, I do. So we went through the first 2 waves of task, and these were ones that we couldn't make decisions on. So for task business reason, that actually is a copy paste error, but one of them is for task code, I believe it was, and the other one is for task business reason. Both of those, we need some draft value sets to go with them so we know what we're voting on for that binding. So that was an action item out of the meetings for people to go away and develop a draft value set to bring back to the TDG. I don't think they've been started yet, but when they're done, they'll come back and then we can vote on the inclusion of those. So yeah, it is task code and business reason. And the other one was task last modified. It was the last one we did at a very long day. So it was, we couldn't get to a decision on it and we're kind of doing it ad hoc. So I think the idea there is we'll go away. Heath will have create a proposal and bring that one back. So we're clearer on what we're voting on for last modified.
Yep, all right, cool. Okay, so I think that's all from me. I'm actually going to hand over to you proper now, Michael.
Okay, I might share my screen. I might take over.
No problem.
I can jump through. So share. One. Hopefully everyone press the share button. Does that help? Hopefully everyone can see that now. Yep. All right, so the first thing you can do is just go through a bit of an overview of what happened at Connectathon last week. So we had a TDG day first. I'll talk about task and what we did there a little bit later. But then we had 2 days of connecting at the Connectathon. So the key things we were trying to achieve at the Connectathon was we wanted to test the ballot comment snapshot of AU eRequesting IG. So that's where we're up to at the moment, which only included service request in it. And then we wanted to test and discuss some of the eRequesting concepts and architecture for Fire. So some of the things that we know we need to look at for the future. So out of that, we had a lot of talking, actually. For Connectathon, we actually did a lot of talking because there was a lot to talk about with eRequesting. So we had 4 breakout sessions. We had 2 on day 1 and 2 on day 2. The first one on day 1 was the eRequesting path and radiology procedure terminology value sets. And then we talked about some advanced topics in service request. And then day 2, we did more advanced topics, but that was focused around groups. And then we had another one on eRequesting pathology and radiology terminology value sets. So in that, the first one was kind of, it was looking at the requirements that billers need in order to use the pathology and radiology terminology value sets. So it's basically just discussing what billers and places need to support a single code on the wire. So we discussed the different approaches, like the use of site, selecting site, modality, like laterality, or just text searching and the like. And some of the issues we talked about was around translation of use of free text, how that sort of pops up in use. And we also discussed the approach for the hierarchy of the code systems when that's using the appropriate value sets that you have available. Then we jumped into, in the afternoon, we had advanced topics on service request. Heath took us through this, and we talked about missing and suppressed data. About the basic conclusion we came to on that was that we really don't want any of the mandatory elements that we have must support for to allow missing or suppressed data. We couldn't come up with any use cases or requirements where missing and suppressed data would be useful or it actually cause more problems than it would solve. So that was general consensus. So we weren't making decisions in this. We were just discussing and trying to come around. Any of these will come back as proposals to the TDG to vote on. So it was really just having a bit of a talk and trying to get a bit of a consensus on what we might want to do. We also talked about contained resources, whether we use contained resources, what we would put in contained resources. We didn't really come to any conclusions there, but it was good discussion around the usage of that. And then demographic resource references, so things like patient and the like. So we talked about the different ways of referencing resources, about persistence, when you update them, do you update them, those sorts of things. Again, the general consensus we had here that the persistence and management of those demographic resources like patient would be the responsibility of the placer or filler as required, and that we wouldn't be explicit about its use in the IG. But there's probably still some more work to do on how we actually do references. Day 2, we talked about tasks and groups. We had a good whiteboard session there that Angus led us through. And we talked about the different options we might have available for managing an order as a group of service requests. We talked about lists, we talked about composition, service request group, and request group. Again, the general consensus here that was list felt like it might be the best candidate there, given it was simple and there wasn't a real requirement to need to sort of prevent the duplication of information on the service request. But again, this was just a discussion. I think we'll form a proposal that'll come to the TDG where we can vote on that when we get to groups. And then the day 2 breakout was around the path and radiology terminology value sets again. And this was a bit more technical, this one. So there's a postman collection that's on the track page, and it was talking through about how to use that postman collection, some of the queries you can use with the terminology server, like expand, boost, and validate code. And we discussed a couple of issues like with the validation of display codes and the like. For the actual testing part of the connectathon, or the actual connecting part of the connectathon, the test scenarios were around places creating service requests and fillers consuming them, and access through patient access and re-requesting server. We also, while we're primarily looking at service requests, some people still did a little bit about task as well, even though we had only just discussed that the day before. We also, at the end of the day, or end of the second day, we had some demonstrations from Beta, who their EMR created a service request in the Spark reference server. Telstra Health was creating service requests in the Sonic system. Angus showed us the Sonic CDS hooks example for pathology guidance-based requesting, where it used plan definition and creates a service request in the CDS hooks response as part of that. So when you selected the appropriate condition, it created a service request for you. And at Telstra Health, did an eRequesting IG demonstration. I've walked through their IG. And Daniel Fulks showed us the transaction bundle post to create a service request and task with conditions on the puts, which was pretty good, and a patient portal demo to display service requests from Sparked. So if you're interested in anything, you couldn't make it and you're interested in what went on or the resources that are available, this is the track page, all the information, everything we went through on the Connectathon is there. I don't know if anyone else who was at the Connectathon would like to say anything that they got out of it or anything that was good or bad on the day. Happy if no one's, you keep moving on, but the opportunity's there if you wanted to say.
I was going to add that there was a lot of talking done, but the talking was very informative and it's far more detailed. So I thought the discussions we had in the breakout sessions were great, but yeah, probably not a lot of actual connectathon connecting.
Yeah, I think that was the nature of where we're at with eRequesting at the moment, given that the IG only had service request in it. So
yeah,
that was, I think, the nature of where we were. We needed to do a lot of talking about what was coming and the approaches we might take. But hopefully, there for future connectathons, we will have a lot more in the IG, and there will be a lot more connecting and testing out the IG. So moving into task waves. So this is what on the day before the Connectathon, we had a work group day. We had 3 sessions on task. So there was 3 1.5 sessions of eRequesting. So if you didn't make it, that's what all those minutes are about that we'll send out for you to review and see where we got to. But I'll just go through for anyone that wasn't there, a bit of a summary of what we were talking about and where we're at. And then we'll continue on with the waves of decision-making for task. So this is a bit of a summary. This was done in the first session on the workgroup day last Tuesday. And the thing was here about talking about the role of service request and task. So this is where the service request represents the place's request for a diagnostic service, and it captures the authorization from the requester to perform the diagnostic request. Records the requester's intent to initiate the request and tracks the authorization request status by the placer. So on the other hand, the task, which is what we're talking about now, records the assignment of the service request to the filler and tracks the fulfillment status of the diagnostic request by the filler. And the placer and the patient may monitor the status of fulfillment. So that's where service request is all about the place's authorization and creation of the request, and the task is around the tracking of the fulfillment of that service request. So they're the key distinctions between the two. This is probably reasonably small, but this again was just giving an indication of where we were going, and I think we actually made most of these decisions. So the 2 blue ones in the middle there is service request and task. So that's where the service request, the requester is a practitioner role, the subject is a patient, and then the eRequesting, the focus of the eRequesting task is the service request, and it has the same requester and the same subject, which in the case of the task is actually called for. And then at the bottom we have an owner. So this is who's filling the and we identified that as an. And this is the state machine that's used for task. So this is managing that fulfillment status. So, Window, you got a question?
Michael, in the previous slide,
Yep.
we also not able to find any connection, how to link with the placer organization. So the owner is a filler organization.
Yep.
And
so from practitioner role, is that?
So from the order perspective, so mostly all the placer identifier that we are using has a signer as placer organization.
Right.
But order or any information is directly not linked to placer organization. Do we have anyone know how to do that?
So I'm not quite sure I got the question. But...
Is Tailwind? I've had a similar concern, and I'm not sure if it's the same thing. It might be. I've struggled with, we don't have the vendor system. So a doctor places an order, and yeah, we want to know where that doctor placed that order from, which in my view is the practitioner roles organization. So Brown Street Surgery, that's where the order came from. But one thing I felt I'm missing, which might be what you're getting at, is what system, like, was it from best practice or medical director? Like, what was the system that generated this order for that surgery? Is that what you mean, Alan?
Yes, yeah. So most of all the placer identifier has that assigner information, but that means somehow I need to use FirePaths to get that information. But there is no direct linkage of service requests to placer organization.
Only through practitioner role, is that the...
I didn't see that so much a problem. Like, I can find the practitioner roles organization if I trace through it. Or it'd be nice if it straight off service request, but I don't think that's really a reality.
Yeah, it is. I've deliberately, off this diagram here, left organization off practitioner role, because in AU Core, it's optional, right? So practitioner role, it's optional to have an organization. But that's where we in eRequesting might have to profile this and say, no, practitioner role, it must have an organization. And that's where we might have to look. Some of these references we've got to AU Core profiles, we then need to look at those and say, well, do we need to further constrain them so they fit the purpose for eRequesting? And that might be a candidate there. With that practitioner role, we're going to say, well, this doesn't work unless they've got an organization.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need more work to look more into, this context, where did the request come from. For me, it's Sonic. We're missing the which vendor did it come from, which, in V2, we get like best practice, and we even get the version number. It came from this best practice, this version, which is fantastic going forward and troubleshooting, because when you have an issue, it's like, oh, they haven't upgraded their best practice, where we don't have any of that in our model here yet. You have no idea where that order came from, apart from maybe a doctor's surgery, but using what? Using Genie, using best practice, medical director. What was the system that created this order that had this error?
I think you're starting to head into message header territory at that point.
But I'm not. But isn't it not a valid use case? I mean, are we in a world now where we just create orders by some mystery system and we're not told?
There's a place to put that in the metadata. It's just whether we want to enforce such things. So you can do kind of, meta.source, which we use all the time. But it's not I believe it's just an unstructured string. So we probably just need to talk through that. I think that's a different issue though than what Tailwinder's talking about.
I think I agree. So Tailwinder, is it because there's no mandatory organisation or practitioner role? Is that part of the complaint you're making?
Yeah. So more importantly, I'm going towards any field, like service request should have some field as assigner, which say who is assigning this service request, who's creating this service request, and that points to an organization. Instead of going to practitioner role and identifying the things, a direct linkage of order to the placer. That's where I'm going.
I think the intent was that it would be practitioner role with the organization link off there.
Yeah, that was my intent. I agree with maybe it should be mandatory, but I thought that was the answer to the conundrum, is that it's the organization's practitioner role, and hadn't considered whether we then restate that in some way from the service request.
We might just want to look at the MBS constraints about whether it's what the likelihood of a practitioner unaffiliated with an organization, whether that use case is actually something we would be covering.
Yeah, Brett.
Because I think if this is about locating where to send the response, the actual results? What's it for? Yeah.
Who sent the order?
Yeah, but
Just
why do you need it?
Hmm.
What are you going to do with it?
I think we need it. I don't think it's an
so
argument of not needing it.
But the
so
thing
we
is,
did.
you know who sent it from, like, from the practitioner. But why do you need, you know, and that's why I'm getting at, I think it is intimately linked to the MBS claiming,
The claimant, yeah.
but I'm just curious about whether if we did make it mandatory, is there a case where you could legitimately create an order with no organisation? So a practitioner in isolation would be able to do it. It's kind of a policy regulatory kind of call.
Yeah, because if it's necessary for claiming, that's one thing. Yeah, and I guess if it's used essentially to help direct any return messages, that might be another use. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're saying like if we direct to a co-practitioner role, that means I need to define my own profile over it, which mandates organization,
Yeah.
and for e-requesting especially.
Yeah, I think we have to
I
go
think, yeah.
through anything AE core we're referencing and then review whether that is appropriate for us or not. So that's something we have to do.
For Sonic, it is very much about the Medicare provider number, right? So if the requester's Medicare provider number becomes the link to us knowing where to deliver the report back in the 95%, but we also very much use in V2 messaging the sending facility code, but as it's in sort of an operational sense, right? Like everything's the keys off that. Like it came from this facility. Our stats as to what orders did we get from where are all driven off that facility code. So it's less about billing or workflow, but more about it's kind of like the key metric of how we chop everything. Like these came from this surgery.
I think you start to wander into provider directory use cases at that point, because I think there's a case to say you should be getting a provider directory vendor identifier, which is essentially a return address for messaging as part of the content. But that's not, we haven't talked about that in scope. Yeah.
I think this is going into that whole well which we haven't really stepped into, which is provider identification. You're dead right, Brett. Brett. It's no small
that will
can of
be
worms. Yeah.
That will also be for copy twos, right? That will be a similar issue. Yeah.
Barty?
Yeah, I was just about to say what Angus said, that provider number is something which is easily usable to identify who and where it is coming from, because it has obviously the information of the one who's placing it and from where they are placing it. And in hospital solution that we're working on, we have made it mandatory. If somebody is an ordering doctor, they need to have a provider number. Otherwise, they're not even allowed to place an order or a request on that. So, yeah, I mean, something is needed for that identification, like where now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we've found another whole category of.
Yeah. All right. Daniel, I did see your hand go up and then go back down again. Did you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think you've been discussing the important aspect. I just wanted to say, when we were talking about getting the software information, I think the purpose of having an interoperability standard is so that you can be independent of that. Not that you shouldn't necessarily have something in metadata if it's available, but it shouldn't be part of our core spec.
Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, I might just move ahead. So this was the state machine we talked through as well. So this is managing the fulfillment through the task. In last week, we decided that draft, ready, and it's not on this diagram, but I think entered in error were not things that not states that we were interested in. So we looked at removing those. And I think, so this was for anyone who's playing catch up and to know more about what we're talking about with task, its role, how workflow works. These are the resources you can use to sort of get up to speed around the definition of the FHIR task resource, the workflow overview. There were some workflow information sessions that Angus did earlier in the year that are available here as well. The Renee Spronk presentation, which is a really good presentation to all the ins and outs of workflow. And down the bottom is our eRequesting use cases as well. So that's just something when we're looking at all these decisions we're trying to make around tasks at the moment, they need to be grounded around the use cases that we've got for R1. So there's just some links there. And now on to the waves, the task waves of decision making we're going through. So last Tuesday, we went through wave 1 and 2, which was around flagging must support, cardinality, determining the data types and terminology bindings and the like. So today we want to move into wave 3 searches and make a start probably on wave 4. I doubt we'll get through wave 4 today if we even get a start on it, but hopefully Heath will join us to go through some of the wave 4 stuff as well. So where'd we get to from last week with our 3 mammoth sessions we had on Tuesday? We got these must support elements identified and their cardinality and their types. So we've got task 4, requester, group identifier, intent, priority, status reason, owner, focused, and authored on. So all of those decisions have been made. They're in the minutes from last week's session, and they'll go into the IG over the coming weeks, so you can actually see them in our IG as it develops. So there'll be opportunity to comment more on those later. If you found issues with them, you can bring them up and raise them with us. So the ones that were still outstanding from that wave 1 and 2 was task business reason, task code, and last modified. So the ones I mentioned before, the business reason and code, we want some draft value sets to go with those, so we know what we're voting on for the bindings. And last modifier was just a clearer proposal on what that was about. So we'll come back to those in future meetings as well to close out waves 1 and 2. But now moving into task wave 3, which is about search. So this is about search parameters, and the use of include is the scope we're looking at here. So I've got a list here. We did go through it again a little bit at the end of the last session last week. We didn't vote or anything on it. We just did a quick run through just so there was a little bit of grounding on what's here. And the parameters that I've got here are the underscore ID. So this is basically, it fetches the task as a bundle. It's still searching on a single task, so similar to a read, but it gives you the ability to include additional search parameters on it. So this is where you can do the include and get things like the requester, the patient, and the like with it when you're doing the actual the query. So we're looking at having that as a shell parameter. And example use case for this is a filler retrieves a task that they are filling. So they could pull it by ID. Tawinda?
We need status also.
Yes, so I do have status on the next page.
Sorry.
So yeah, this was one that actually got discussed before, that status by itself isn't very useful because it needs, I can just jump ahead just so we know it's coming, but combining status with other things like patient, owner, requester, or something like that. So just doing a search by status by itself would give you a huge number of tasks. So these parameters here we're talking about as single parameters. And so it was on here, but we've moved it to the other page as to be used as a combined search with other parameters.
Yeah, but so it might not be the use. I'm not sure about that, the use case. But if fillers want to fetch all the newly created orders only, So that
Yes.
can be only through the status.
Yeah, so again, I'll jump ahead, but so this could be done on the owner and
Owner
status.
plus status, yeah.
Yeah, so and this would be fill a search to tasks assigned to them that are in particular workflow states. So using that combination of owner and status.
Awesome, that's great. Thank you.
So the other one is group identifier. So this is searching for tasks for the local order identifier, which is the place of group number. Yeah, Daniel?
Just missing the actual identifier from the placer ID point of view. Just wanting to make sure that we can track an individual status of an individual request that's come through, not just the group. Obviously, the group is really important, but wouldn't it be important to know when a particular test is complete? Or have I missed something?
No. I'm working through. I think I understand the use case. So the one at the bottom there, which is focus. So if you've got the service request, you could find the tasks for it. The ID would be the actual
Okay.
the specific
go
one.
through that.
So but there
Yes.
potentially are you talking about a local identifier or something other than place a group number?
No, just place a group number in that context, and it's repeated in the identifier in the task, I presume. But yeah, no worries. I can see you can do it that way. Yep.
There is a question at the end of this too, which is what else do we need, right? And to
it's fine. So long as you can do it. It's just a slightly more complex search, but very slightly.
Yeah. And I think we're going to have a position on here on what we think the search parameters are initially. I mean, it happened in the Connectathon on the last week where we think this is okay. Then you go to use it and go, oh, I really need this extra parameter. Or I need whatever else, right? When you actually start to use it in vain, you actually find out whether these are suitable or not. And we might think they're okay now and then find out, no, to do particular use cases or particular things you're trying to implement in your systems, that we might need more or changes to these. So this is trying to get us a starting point with things where we think we need, but chances are we'll need to change it over time. So the group identifier was searching by the local order identifier, the place of group number. So that's the same place of group number that's on the service request. So the example for this would be a filler or patient access search for tasks by the place of group number. This is not talking about the actual form of the token that the patient would have, about whether that's a barcode or whatever, but it's about the number that will be associated with that token, and puts all these into a group, which is the order group. So being able to search for tasks by that. Being able to search by the owner, so which is an AU core organization. So for a filler to search for tasks that are assigned to them. Patient, so which is an AU core patient access, search for tasks for them. And the requester, AU core practitioner role, so place a search for tasks that they requested. And then focus, which is the last one, which would be the imaging request or the pathology request. And the use case for this, example use case for this might be that a placer search for all tasks that were created for a service request. It might be find tasks for the original directory request and the task for where it was claimed. Something like that. Daniel, did you have another question or hands to it? Good.
No, sorry, forgot to allow my hand.
So just anyone have any comments on those, that set of that search parameters being, they're all sort of flagged there as shall, that we would expect those all to be implemented and available. There's obviously, with any search, there's a access control and the like over it, about just because there's a search available doesn't mean you can get any results from it. That's a separate aspect about how we manage access control and the like. But given these search parameters would be the sort of support the use cases we're expecting. Angus.
Can you just comment on includes? I assume they're not here by good reason.
So I've got another slide. So there is another slide here about includes, having patient request to owner and focus flagged for that. So okay. I tried to break this up a little bit. So these are about the single parameters. I've got another slide here about further qualifiers on them. So patient identifiers, owner identifier, requester identifier, the combined ones, and then we go into include. So we could just trying to get the decisions made here. If everyone's reasonably comfortable with this, we could vote on this as a block of search parameters as they're described here, or we could do it separately. So is there any that are in here that are contentious that someone thinks we should talk about separately? Or if there's not, I might propose that we vote on these search parameters as a group. Danielle?
I just wanted to ask a clarification, which it might not be appropriate now for this one, but I just want to double check. So on the next page, there's patient.identifier, and I just wanted to ask if, so where we've got the chained identifiers, if you just did patient.identifier, does that mean you actually support the previous one?
Yes, so, I would expect so, unless you think otherwise. That's why I put it on the second page as a if you're going to support patient, this is the further an additional requirement on top of patient.
Okay, no, that makes sense to me, and I just wanted to check that was what was meant. Okay, thank you.
Okay, if no one else has any concern, thanks.
What about last updated, not the one that we all had contention at Connectathon, just your basic bulk, the domain resource last metadata last updated. So the idea of me saying, hey, give me all tasks forward of this date, and then give me all tasks forward of that, your next batch.
So that would be and that last updated then is that any update to that resource, right? That's the system generated, something changed.
Yeah, that one.
So, So you've potentially read go give me all the tasks up to a particular timestamp. I'll process them, and then I'll go get the next block up to now as a chunk. Yep. So do we want to have
so is that a friendly amendment?
Well, I hadn't made the proposal, but I was going to.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I was going to make a proposal that we accept these search parameters as they're described here, with the addition of last updated as a shell, as Angus had identified.
And does that come with greater than, less than, what are they called, prefixes or whatever? So
not automatically. I would suggest we discuss last updated separately.
Yeah.
Especially if you'd like to introduce comparators discussion.
Yeah, I think for my use case, you need the comparators, right? You're not just saying this date, you're saying everything greater than this date or less than that date.
Yeah. Marlon?
I just had, sorry, a further question. When we're voting on shell, that applies to all actors then? Like _ID, group identifier, or is this just for the filler or just for the placer, or?
So the obligations are going to be in wave 4. So.
Oh, because okay. So when we go to wave 4, we'll go back through this list and confirm whether or not shell is which actor.
Yes, I think we'll, yes.
Okay, so we're agreeing this is the initial pool of shells, and then in wave 4 we'll distribute these across the different actors. Okay,
Yes.
I understand now.
Marvin?
With the Angus, you were just talking about. Are you talking about the underscore last updated date in the .meta?
Absolutely, yes.
Which I guess is kind of standard for all resources. Is what you're saying is that we need to do something special to make that a mandatory must support parameter? Is that what you're proposing?
I have, yeah, for the task use case, yes. I'm not going as far as saying on everything, but in my view, yeah, I have a view that I would certainly, I use it today. It'd be, it facilitates going, task is very much this, I got to do all the tasks, right? And there's many ways to do that, but one way is to give me all the tasks since the last lot of tasks I got, sort of batching, saying, give me all tasks forward of this date timestamp.
Yep.
And then give me all tasks forward of the next date timestamp.
So, I mean, this is a generic question actually to people more knowledgeable than me. What is the I guess must support type status for things that are in the .meta? If there's a search parameter underscore last updated, is that something that people are supposed to support, or is
So
that
everything's a May at the moment, Marvin. So even
Okay.
like we've been talking about underscore ID, it's really the same category as underscore last updated. So
Yeah.
but we've said, you shall support this here because we really, really need it. Everything's a May unless otherwise stated.
Okay.
Really, that's how I see it anyway.
All right, that's cool. I'm comfortable with that.
But yeah, we're basically saying we've got a very specific use case for this, and we really, really need you to support this. Otherwise, the whole workflow breaks.
Yeah.
I've got another one too. Task.code. Is task.code in our list here? I didn't see it on that page.
No, it's not at the moment.
And
we haven't
task,
actually got code in as must support yet. So
and task.meta.tag is not in this list.
we haven't got.
Maybe it's for future conversations.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think the code one as well is when we bring in code, because we haven't got it in there must support yet.
So once we decide on code, then we can then say, and we need the search parameter for it.
Yeah, I think that's right. So when we bring in some of these other ones that we've missed or coming back to, we can essentially do all the
that's fair.
all the waves through that as well. So
that includes business status and stuff.
Yeah, those ones that we hadn't addressed.
Right. So this is our sort of first past obvious, not contention set.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll make the proposal that we accept the definition of these search parameters as they're described on the screen. We'll do the other ones like last updated separately. So I'll propose that if there's a second.
I'll second it.
Okie dokie. Did you launch one, Michael?
No, can you do it? Sorry. Too many windows.
Just while you're doing that, back to Danielle's comment, I've provided some example use cases here, so that'll inform, I guess, the next step around which actors need to support these individual parameters.
All right, so I've managed to work out how to make it start. You should now have a poll up on your screen asking you to vote for the motion that Michael has put forward. Currently at 70%.
I'm a host, so I can't vote. But I'll put my vote down as affirmative.
All right. Okay, we'll close that one off in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so that one has ended, and you should be able to see the results, but they are 33 affirmative, and 10 abstained. So that one is passed. Thank you.
Okay. So jump to the next one. So again, the shell on these is that an actor would be used this, and it's probably most likely the server would need to support this so that you can search by the identifier. So this would be patient identifier, so we can support search using IHI, Medicare number, DVA number identifiers that are defined in the AU core patient profile. We have the same for owner.identifier that supports searching by HPIO and ABN identifiers in the organization profile, and requester.identifier supports searching by Medicare provider number identified in the AU core practitioner role profile. And then looking at the combined ones, the patients plus status. So searching for tasks that attached to a patient and have a particular status. And this one includes that it shall support multiple or, so that you can say whether status is accepted or in progress, or whatever combination of status that you would like to search on. And that would be for a patient access search for tasks their service request or in particular workflow states. And then owner status, same deal, multiple or, searching for fillers, searching for tasks assigned to them that are in a particular workflow state. And then requester and status, the status accepted in progress as multiple or any combination, and place of searching for tasks that they requested are in a particular workflow state. So does any comments on the support for any of these, Daniel?
Yeah, just want to say what I still missed then is the focus identifier in there. If we're going to be able to do a search for a particular part of an order, an individual item with an individual placer identifier, I think that's important, because things like micros and things like that can take quite a long time. And if you've got other things on the boil that might have been completed, you want to be able to see what's completed and what's not completed from the placer perspective, and probably from the patient perspective as well.
So because the focus is on a particular service request, it's not the group number. And I think we have, I can't remember exactly where we got to the must support on identifier, but I don't think it was a must support in the end. It might have been a should or something like that. But so I don't agree, because of the identifier being at the if anything, what we're looking for is requisition, not identifier. So if you want focus.requisition, not focus.identifier. So perhaps that's what you're asking.
Does the focus.requisition though is the equivalent of group identifier?
Yeah. So I think the assumption,
Heath,
that you're making is that you only want all or nothing. And my assertion is that when you have different orders that will take different timeframes to deliver, that it's important to be able to individually track them.
I understand that, but the rationale of saying this is not really relevant at this time, or certainly not a shall, is because identifier is not must support. Now, I'm happy to be corrected, because that's about a meeting or two ago.
So, Daniel, I'm not understanding, because the task.status tells you whether that service request is in progress, finished. You know, the status it's not the status of the service request that's telling you the progress of fulfillment. It's the status of the task. You don't need to go to the service request to say, is this task completed or not completed? The status on the service request is more the GP has requested this service request and he may have cancelled that service request. And if he cancels that service request, the placer, I believe it's the placer's role to then cancel this task, right? So I'm not sure what the use case is for going from the task to the service request status.
If I'm understanding correctly, we're talking about equivalent OBR4, right? But we're not doing OBR4 equivalents.
Oh,
Yeah,
I see. You want to go from the task to the service request code to know that this right.
Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, I wasn't.
Wrong.
I get it now.
Sorry,
So-
not OBR4, OBR3. To the filler of our border number.
HL7 2X aside, just talking, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but if I want to search for the task related to a particular placer order number, not group number, then I would have thought that's a valid thing to want to do. So I want to be able to see the status of the request, but I also want to be able to see the status of the task that relates to that request. So that means I need to be able to search for a task that relates to that request. And I don't see that in the list of search parameters that we've discussed so far.
Could it be a rev include though on the service request for something like that to get the task for the service request? If you're coming at it from, are you starting with the service request and you wanted to get the task status?
Yeah, I guess so. Are you going to support that though?
we don't have that now, but I think we might want to.
I would have thought that it's much simpler to say that there is a logical use case for wanting to identify by an individual placer ID all of the relevant task and request status, and that to me that is meaningful both from the placer perspective, being able to view what's going on, and also from a patient who has access to that information. Now you could say, well, we'll just search for everything and get it all back at once through the group or requisition ID. That's valid, but it's meaning that you're getting multiple answers rather than getting the individual answer that you're looking for, which I think is valid in some cases. So I'm just expressing a point of view. I'm happy to be disagreed with.
That's fine. Brett, yeah.
Oh, yeah. From a placer perspective, I guess since service request identifier isn't mandatory, it kind of leaves that being more difficult. And I think you end up having to say you need to actually have a reference to the service request, because then you could end up doing a focus search on task to get the answer. So it is like, there's a question like when you create the service request in the first place, if you actually retain the reference, that would be the thing you could use to do the lookup, right? But that's an extra step in the process. But it does also mean that you don't need to have a service request identifier as well, which we haven't made mandatory anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say I remember having this discussion a few weeks back, didn't we? We were talking about should service requests have place order numbers. We were a bit torn on that. And some people were suggesting it's a legacy from V2 that we don't need here because we have resource IDs, and others had other views. And then this dovetails into that, isn't it? It's like, if you are going to have a place order number on service request, then I see, if you're in that camp, then I can see Daniel's concern that, well, then don't you want to be able to find the task based on that, and vice versa?
And we're not saying you can't support it. It's just that it's not a must-have. Right? That we're looking at the core We can build on this later, but what are the absolute minimum for an initial release one? That's what we're looking for today, based on the fact that we've said service request identifier is not mandatory, then I don't see it mandatory from the search criteria.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point, isn't it? It comes down to like the decision about service requests dot identifier. Like if it's mandatory, then you need this. If it's not mandatory, then you probably don't need this. And it's not mandatory now. I feel like the discussion is more about should service request have some sort of identifier on it. That's the real discussion. And then once you've made that decision, then it comes back down to should you be able to search on it.
All right. Well, none of the conversation today has been around the ones that are on the screen. So I might make a proposal around these ones, and then anyone else, I don't know, Angus, you've got one you want to add, and Daniel, if you want to make one, others can make a proposal about other ones we want. And we can do those as separate votes, if that works. Tawinda?
My point concern here is the patient and the requester. We are supporting at task level and as well as service request level, right? So they're both going to be present. So on a wording side, like if I'm want to fetch an order for a given patient, shouldn't it be referred through the service request? Even if I'm fetching the task resource, I would say focus.patient instead of patient.identifier. So thought here is, should we support patient and requesters at task level? This will lead us, like if we support both task and service request, this will lead us in future. Some people are making queries on the patient, using on the task using patient, and some using over the service request. And it will be hard to define one single way of querying orders.
Well, we have made those as mandatory must support elements on task. So the requester, the patient is 4. We're saying that they're there. So, and that I believe is primarily to support search and include and the like. So that you don't have to always go to the service request to get that.
And again, we're writing a profile without necessarily knowing exactly how people are going to use it. Some people might want to use it at the task level. Some people might want to use it on the service request level. So we're kind of guessing at this point in time around what might be the minimum requirement. So if people don't think that these are minimum requirements, let's stretch them. Because ultimately, once they're in the spec, you're going to have to implement them. So it's just a candidate set. And I guess when I did this list, it was coming in from the perspective of how do we use identifiers in a distributed environment. Again, when it's a single repository, the client's working with a single repository of resources, we may know all those reference IDs. So these are shortcuts for a more distributed environment where we, as a client, may not exactly know what is the patient ID or the resource ID. All we know is their IHR. So this gives us that ability to do that kind of search. Similar with organizations, and I'm pretty sure, Angus, you're using owner identifier. Perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps you've changed your algorithm.
Using owner identifier, absolutely, for HPIO.
Yeah, and so it was really, okay, what else? Well, requester identified, owner identifier by HPIO, why not requester by Medicare provider number?
it is very much almost those three actors, isn't it? Like the labs want to find tasks that they're responsible for, that they own. The patient role wants to find tasks for their patient, and the requesting system, placer system, wants to find tasks for that doctor, that requester.
Otherwise, we're forcing the clients to always do that initial lookup by against the practitioner role, against the organization or patient resources to get the ID before we can actually do this. So this is a shortcut really to for people to just say, okay, I just want the requests, tasks for this patient, for this owner, but by their national provider, national identifiers.
Okay. Well, I might take this one. We'll see if we can take this one to a vote. So I'd like to propose that we accept these task search parameters as they're defined on the screen there.
Second.
Okay, very good. We'll start a new poll. All right, if you would like to vote for the task search parameters as displayed on the screen, please vote now.
I'll add my vote to affirmative as well, given I can't vote.
Okay, we're going to close that one off pretty soon. 3, 2, 1. And that one is passed, 31 for, and 12 abstained. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we're going to talk about include, but I think it's probably worth we stay here for a moment. And so any of these ones we've just talked about that haven't been covered on the ones that are listed on the slides, would anyone like to put forward a proposal for some additional search parameters that we haven't included here that I think are important?
The only ones that I've got on the mind, but they're back up at that sort of resource meta type level, like they're like sort and count. But I think maybe they're esoteric. They're kind of like server level type things.
Yeah, but the last update, so we haven't, last updated isn't in there. So if you wanted that one in there, we need to.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, that one as well.
I think I think that's worth doing, Angus, having a discussion about count, and because it does affect clients as well. Yeah.
Is that what we should leave to the? Because I think it's obvious to me that we'll be going through all the search parameters across the actors and then doing a revised set then across the actors to go, what else does this actor need? So I think there's also an opportunity there, especially for actor-specific search support.
I kind of feel like these ones they're like resource level support. Like should the server for every resource support count and last updated and sort? Like it's not, maybe sort's not because it's a bit harder. Count, like it's
no, I don't agree with that, because last updated, as a facade, you may not actually have that information. So I don't think that is appropriate. So I think last updated is special, and I personally think we should be adding it today rather than waiting. I think there is enough of a use case that you put forward. Count, I think is a little bit more optional. There is a slide, couple of slides down, Michael, for requesting furthermore.
There was a similar discussion in provider directory, and the thing is, if you have clients in the mix and you're depending on behavior, it's really hard not to specify, actual requirements, because it's
I agree.
yeah, it gets to the point where that then becomes just system negotiation again, and you know, if it's not getting honoured, there's issues.
I think put your motion forward, Angus, and we can have a vote and see how we go.
So, but the last updated one. So I feel like last update is very important with its greater than less than. The other two, I just don't know where they live, like sort count.
Yeah.
Well,
But
let's do the last updated. Then,
if you don't know, then I don't think we should go there. I think you've got
Yeah.
a clear use case, but put forward your comparators and your multiple ors or multiple and up requirements as well.
Yeah.
So I think if anything, multiple and, but my understanding of your requirement, I don't think you have a multiple and requirement, but
No,
it's
an or, I think.
I don't think you want an or. That'll just be messy.
So I go, it's and, yeah. So last updated, we're greater than this date, and last updated less than this date. Like it's kind of given this range.
Yeah.
And then just greater than and greater than equal to, it's getting a bit fine grained.
In AU core, we normally have the 4. So
yeah, that's I'd like
then greater equal less than equal.
I agree. If you're gonna as soon as you want them, you want all 4, I think.
Yeah. Is that in a combination with owner and maybe status?
Yeah, it is, but for me, it's with owner.
With owner
and status.
Status, yeah. So is this an additional, yeah?
Do we
Combination
necessarily
owner status and last updated?
I struggle. Yeah, I guess
we start with a single.
Yeah, I struggle with the having to join it to something like.
Well, we didn't do status in the end as a single, right? We only did status in the combination.
So we're now going to say.
Yeah, but that's across patients, where this is actually a patient. This is a population query where he's looking for any that has changed.
Yeah, I'm looking for tasks for me in this status ahead of this date. Like
it's with status though, isn't it? You're looking for
it's definitely with status.
With a status. So it's last update. Maybe we need to take it offline.
Yeah, maybe we'll come back with it. Maybe you can come back with a proposal for the next meeting for that one to add it in.
Well, if you're the only person you care about is me, then it's status last updated owner, like those 3 together. Like I can't speak for everyone else, but that's what I do and need.
All right.
Status owner last updated with the greater than less than for prefixes. But whether the other roles want the same thing on their patient one and on their requester one, it's not for me to say. Probably not so much because they're just putting stuff in and then querying the stuff they put in, where I'm trying to trawl through a whole, like I'm just trying to kind of consume this stuff coming in. Right?
Daniel?
Oh, look, this might be a too hard basket one, but I'm just thinking about Vision ID and thinking in the case of conditional updates of patient practitioner, organisation, role, then it's important to be able to identify whether there have been any changes since the last updated reference that a person has and whether they do actually update that. Happy to put it aside for a subsequent discussion, but it's a point of view.
Yeah, it's a really good point, but it's not a search parameter, is it? It's more a, what's the term? When you do the put or the transaction bundle put, there's a flag where you put the version number if version or something.
Yeah, the e-tag.
Yeah, the e-tag thing.
Space, yeah.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a search parameter, is it? It's a header inputs, and it's a property in a transaction bundle that says if last version, right?
Well, you normally put it in the conditional in a bundle. That's all.
Yeah.
So I presume that
I don't think it's a search
comes part of the
parameter, but
search.
yeah.
Oh, if it isn't, that's fine. I take it offline. Yeah.
But I think we'll need to get into that at some stage, because you want to be pretty explicit as to what the servers need to support, because it's fine if you've got a regular file server that does all this, but if you're facading, this might be tough.
If match, it's called. In a bundle, it's literally a property on the request called if match, and then if you're doing a put, I believe it's a header called if match where you put the version number.
That's all standard RESTful functionality though. That e tags and if match headers. So,
but I don't think the fire spec says you have to do it.
No, you don't.
No.
Yeah, you don't have to do it.
Yeah,
and that's
so
the
if you
reason
want to
why I
say
was
that,
raising it.
if you do want to say it,
I think that will be part of when we get to updates, how we do that. I think it's really important, but I don't think it's a search parameter.
I agree with Andy's comment, but I think we need to be explicit if we're going to say we're going to use it as part of the business. Yep.
All right. Are we going to move on? Do you want to come back with a proposal, Andy, or do you want to do it now? Sorry, Angus.
I'd like to propose that you add owner status last updated with the 4 prefixes: greater than, less than, greater than, equals.
So I've just written in the chat a worded proposal. So shall support
perfect
underscore last updated plus status plus owner shall support multiple or, although I've said multiple of, for status, shall support multiple and comparators LE, LT, GT, GE, or underscore last updated.
Yep, I agree. I'm looking at it. Yep, it does. I agree. So with that proposal added.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Right. Okay. So just a reminder for everyone, the note that is being proposed is in the chat, so you can read that there if you would like. And I will start a poll. Okay, if you would like to vote for the current motion on the last updated plus status plus owner, please do so now.
I'm affirmative for that one too.
You want to just throw in a negative every now and again to keep it real?
Take the tree.
Okay, and I think we might close that one off in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so that one is approved, 25 for, 13 abstained.
Dan?
Thank you. I can't see a reason why you wouldn't supply the same for patient and requester.
I think the idea here is what Angus is doing is because he's processing as the filler. He's processing and batch processing ones that have been assigned to him as the filler. I suppose the other ones would be if you're maintaining some sort of, to know whether you need to refresh what you've got on the screen or the like. That might be the case for that. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking from a practitioner standpoint. If they are looking for tasks that they have they're waiting to see where those tasks are at, are they going to need to know the task IDs, or can they do a blanket search like that?
So, I mean, this is around subscriptions in particular and polling. So, which may be as a result of receiving a subscription notification.
Right. Okay.
I don't think you would be doing that at a patient level. I don't think you'd be doing it on a individual requester level. I think you'd be probably considering it more on a requesters organization level. So I think that needs a little bit more thought, not to sort of say, no, we can't do it. But the use case that I guess is put forward is quite a clear use case, in my opinion, because of the filler's desire to poll a server.
And that's fine. I'll wrap my head around it a bit more and raise it another time if I think it's appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something. I see where you're going, and is it a must-have for at least one requirement?
Sure.
And certainly, like I said before, is when we get into start testing this, yeah, there's ample opportunity to add more in later. So just because this is what we've got now doesn't mean that's what we're stuck with forever. So there'll be other opportunities to put them in if we do come up with some other ideas we need. Marv?
Listen, maybe Barty, if you're still on, can comment from a hospital perspective. As a practitioner, you are going to be wanting to see the orders that are still outstanding for yourself. Now, typically, you would have that in your system, so you'd know what that order, the list of orders that you've got. And is, Heath, what you're saying that if we do subscriptions and we would be getting the updates to that, therefore we probably would know and be able to display that list potentially without having to go and query that downstream system?
Again, I'm thinking about just what we have considered as part of the Magentus Sonic scenario, and from a placer perspective, the idea was that we would subscribe to that server and get that information and put it back into my placer system. So yes, you would have that information already rather than actually querying a live centralized intermediary, whatever we want to call this server.
Yeah.
I struggle with that sort of thinking. Like it's, you know, we're now just, we're overlaying one implementation's implementation on, you know, like to say that, oh no, the way you'll do this is you'll do a subscription and then just keep it all in your database on a feed of updates. Is that really where we're going here? Like, I mean, I'm not saying that's not an approach to do, but are we now just going, oh no, that is the approach? Like it feels like I could have not my role, but I would have thought the patient role and the requester role, it's a pretty simple, I can see the UI where it's like, show me your requests in the last year that are pending. Like,
oh, the patient is a completely different use case. I completely agree. I was talking about the placer. And again, we don't know really. We haven't really given much thought around what the patient access role needs to do. I think it's something to discover.
Yeah, because if I think about filters, if I think about what a clinician is looking at doing, they just want to see the things that they've got outstanding that they haven't actioned or that they need to action. So they don't want it filled with all sorts of other stuff. It just needs to be a very specific, here's the things that you need to focus on. And,
so we've got requester and status there, right? Which would be, show me everything that's in a particular state or states that you're interested in.
And here's the ones from 10 years ago.
Well, I assume you're not looking at ones that are complete, you're looking at ones that are outstanding.
They might be outstanding forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the live one, isn't it? Whereas, you know, the one that we've just added with the last update, it is really a subscription / polling scenario. And I can, as I said, see that for placer, but I don't see it being on an individual requester level. I see it more at an organizational level.
I think it's, yeah, I agree with that, Heath. But I think you do need to assume that there are clients that can't accept push notification as well. I think you just have to assume that, and it's yeah. But I think, yeah, I think there's cases for patient, but I think, yeah, organization makes more sense. Like an organizational level, if you're doing syncing, right? If you want to actually just as a placer get your records up to date, you want to be able to do essentially a time window based sync of what's changed that I was the placer for.
I think it's a challenge
and patient, and patient also you could do on demand. So basically, when you have a patient record, you could do it on demand and find the latest changes, and that might be a sync at that time into the patient record. So these are just like different system setups, right? So it's more about, yeah, what are we going to cater for?
I think in a GP practice, for example, the number of things you will get back from an order from what you've ordered from an organization level will be fairly small. But if you're in a hospital and you've got many clinicians who are doing orders, to return back the list for an organization could be overwhelming.
From a back end system
perspective, I think
I think
it's a back end. Yeah, he said, it's a back end
no,
scenario.
I'm thinking from the front end perspective.
But you wouldn't be using last updated in that situation, would you?
Well, you might want the other.
Yeah, you could do it on demand. It could be just lazy, right? Where you just go, I'm going to update when I need it, when I'm going to look at it.
You might be querying on a request date or something like that.
Created date or something.
Well, I don't know that you necessarily would, because if I'm thinking of one of the apps that we have is that a clinician will just want to be able to say, I want to, and listen, maybe it is solved by the requester status and maybe the additional date, and that's all that we need. But I just think we need to be careful about thinking that the list that's returned is going to be small in a hospital scenario.
Yeah, and I think like a mobile app, whether it's a patient or provider app, right? You're going to want to have a time filter or a syncing filter, right? Where you're going to look at it only from a particular requester perspective or a particular patient perspective. Yeah.
But the search results are still going to be paged anyway. So large or small, the server is not going to generate every possible search kind of result and then page through them. This is a known issue in file servers, so I wouldn't be worried too much about that.
We do have to support.
It's not about the server being underperforming, but it's really about filtering through that list to then find what you need from a hospital perspective is different from a GP perspective. Is what I'm saying.
I think when you're talking the user perspective and not just a background machine trying to chew through stuff, which was my use case, then it's not last updated that you're looking for. It's something like authored on, like show me all the requests for this doctor authored on last week.
I don't know. It depends if you're syncing, right? If you're syncing into a client, you would still want up last updated. Yeah,
true. They're two different use cases. Like I can see both use cases.
But thinking's back end, right? So that's why I think Marvin needs to think exactly what the use case is. I mean, I've got a fundamental problem with the way that we are pre-coordinating these search criteria, and I don't know how we solve it, but from a performance perspective, but this is going to be explode basically as the use cases come forward. I think it's unmanageable using this approach, to be honest. So I share that view.
That this pre-coordination is just going to go haywire in the end. Like you should be saying to people that there are these search parameters, and people will and them and all them as they see fit. Right.
Yeah, that's hard to test though. So,
but I think it is like we have to have some standard pathways, right? And this will define that. And I think it's whether you do more for optimization purposes or whatever, I think that's I think we're trying to cover how it would normally work. Yep.
We're gonna just have to, we're nearly at the end of the meeting. We'll just have to close this out. So we'll come back on our next meeting on Tuesday to finish off search, and we're going to cover off include as part of that. But the other end of this, to close this wave out, is there any other search? So if anyone's got a proposal they want to bring on Tuesday for additional searches that we've been talking about here, or other ones that we haven't talked about, please bring those on Tuesday so that we can bring them to a vote if something you think we need. And then we'll jump into wave 4. Sorry, I'll just jump ahead through. We've got a heap of wave 4 stuff. But this is the plan for the moment. Ballot for comment is still open till the 8th of September. So we've got the meeting on Tuesday before then. And then we'll have to go into some ballot comment resolution as well in the meetings after the ballot comment close. So we'll continue on task for the next meeting, and then we'll have to juggle that with other ballot for comment resolution items after that. Tawinda?
Michael, I was in the last meeting, and if I have some concerns, is that going to be on a ballot comment?
So the votes have been made on those, and you're welcome to raise issues on those. So you can raise issues on anything there. I mean, everything at the moment is still nothing's been locked in stone. It's where we can't state. They will have to go through another ballot later as well, because task isn't included in the current ballot for comment. So there'll have to be another ballot at some point around all of this. So, but yeah, the issues can certainly be raised.
Okay. So I can create an issue on Jira.
Sorry, what was that?
So I can
Yes.
create an issue. Okay.
Yeah, you can. Jira feedback can be used to capture not just issues on existing content, but enhancements or things that you think are missing or that we really need to be considering.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. I think we're all done.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Great meeting. Michael, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just a final reminder to people from the founding member perspective. So tomorrow we're closing any more founding members for Spark. So if you want to be involved and want to show your commitment and recognize your organization up on the page, please email fire@siro.au so that we can put your logo up there and keep coming to these sessions. It's really good to see the progress we're making. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. Yes. All right, brilliant. So I think we'll wrap it up there, and we'll see you again on the 3rd of September. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.